Okay, guys. So I have Rob from the Baseline Bums podcast, also the B-Ball Archives. Rob, why don't you go ahead and just introduce yourself to the audience?
So yeah, I'm Rob, aka B-Ball Archives. I run a little basketball, little memorabilia online store, but also I talk basketball. I have a podcast. I'm a former college basketball player, so pretty much my whole life is centered around hoops, and I love talking about it any chance I can get.
And as you guys can see from Rob's brilliant background here, big Spurs guy, huge Spurs guy. So today we're going to be chopping it up about the Spurs. So you guys have obviously made a lot of drastic moves or changes now since the last season, seeing that Victor is basically panned out for you guys as long as, everyone stays healthy, God forbid, and all that. So I had a question for you. What are your expectations for this team going into the season? Like, what is a successful season?
Well, I'm not gonna just be just absolutely outlandish. I don't have over the top expectations, so
Mm,
I'm going to keep it realistic. So I think getting Chris Paul, drafting a guy like Stefan Castle, and so adding these players that we know they're going to contribute right away. That's going to add to our team chemistry right away, as well as not really playing Jeremy Sohan at point guard. That's not an
mhm.
experiment that we're going to continue this next year. So I think that while we've made it through some of the growing pains, we've added some key pieces. Victor, in his second year, is probably going to feel even more confident. I don't see why we don't get 35 wins. I think that's going to be a pretty reasonable improvement on our 22 win season last year. But I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, we're for sure going to be a playoff team. I think borderline play in at best sounds reasonable.
Yeah, so sort of like the Rockets last year, kind of where like you might be making a little bit of a late season fight for it, but there's no real like we're guaranteed, we're locked in here, like 10 seed, 9 seed, we're here, like kind of feeling okay. And then Rob, I was gonna
Yeah.
ask you a question. I mean, this one because you mentioned him. All right, so I gotta ask Jeremy Sochan. Now, I actually like Jeremy Sochan. I feel like though he definitely, and I wonder if you agree with this. Do you feel like he got scapegoated last year as like the issue for the Spurs? Just because the way everyone talked about him and his play and all that sort of deal.
I do think that he got a lot of unwarranted hate because
Mhm.
whenever there was all of those memes that came out where it was like, "Hey, we're not getting Wemby the ball, and we don't want to pass to Wemby," and all of that talk, he was mainly the butt of the joke. So I feel as if a lot of that hate was unwarranted because he was put into a tough situation. He was being played out of position, and he was being kind of forced. And Pop does this with people. If he can get some greatness out of you and put you out of position for a little bit to where you can learn some skills to potentially be a point forward for a potential future lineup, then he's going to try to do that. And so whenever I was looking at it through that perspective, I was like, man, this is going to be rough for Jeremy Sohan, but it's going to make him a better player in the long run. So I think he's going to look back on that season and be like, dang, that was those were some legit growing pains. But at the same time, I think that there was a lot of other people that were to blame too, because I could point the finger at Malachi Branham or Zach Collins or a number of these guys that were just missing key shots and just shooting too much within our rotation, just really not contributing to any kind of winning basketball.
Now I get you for sure. That the only reason I asked that is because again, like especially for such a young player, I'm pretty sure what that was Sohan's second year in the league. I was like, guys, first of all, clearly he's not meant to be a point guard. Why are we mad at a guy being forced to play out of position? Like second year player, like I get it, you got Wemby, but like, come on, guys, like what are we doing? This is a little unreasonable for this. It's insane to me.
Right. And it's like, did people just expect him to learn those skills overnight? That wasn't even why he was drafted. We drafted him as like a lengthy defender, somebody that could guard a 2, 3, or 4, and somebody that could finish around the rim, and that really needed to learn a lot of offensive skills. So I feel like, hey, this is kind of what we're gonna expect from a 20, about to be 21-year-old.
Yeah, exactly. And then I was going to ask you about another young piece, Keldon Johnson. I feel like he's weirdly lost in the shuffle when Spurs fans talk about young players. Because even with Sochan, there was at least like weirdly negative talks, right? And then you have Devin Vassell, who's been hyped up for sure. And I love Devin Vassell for you guys. But it feels like Keldon Johnson has just been like lost in the shuffle. And like, is he a key piece for you guys going forward? Or is this someone that you're like, hey, if we could shop him, maybe we can, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that he is one of those guys that gets lost in the shuffle because at the same time, it's like we have so many other young, exciting options, and when you see him kind of getting relegated to a bench role mid-season last season, it almost looks like Pop is trying to phase him out of the rotation in certain ways. So I do see why he and other people kind of feel like he's kind of getting lost in the mix, but he's also on a contract that is going to be looking very team friendly in the next year or two whenever these new television right deals come in. And so I think that there's a chance that we could include him in a trade deal and use some of our first round picks and acquire a potentially young dynamic opportunity creating guard. I think that's what we're building up for, and Keldon Johnson could definitely be one of those assets that we put into the trade.
Yeah. Okay. I get you for sure. And then how do you feel now about the point guard room? I mean, now you have Trey Jones still, you got Chris Paul, you have Stephon Castle. Like, and I feel bad for Trey Jones, low key, because I'm like, man, once he actually started to get, playing starting point guard, he actually looked good. The team looked good. But now it's like, I don't know where his minutes are going to come from. How do you feel like, I guess, about this point guard room now?
I mean, I feel pretty good about it because there was times throughout the season where we just didn't know how to get Wemby the ball effectively. So I think Chris Paul definitely gives us a legitimate person that knows how to throw a perfect lob pass to Wemby every time. Arguably the best lob passer in NBA history. So whenever I'm looking at it through that lens, I think it's good because there's not going to be a lot of pressure on Chris Paul to score, and Trey Jones is still very much learning. He has a lot of growing to do, and if you're going to get a Chris Paul in the twilight of his career to teach you a couple of key things when you're in your early mid 20s, I think that could be an invaluable experience for him. So I think that um all of those things would be really good. And Stephon Castle, I don't know if he's a true point guard in the NBA. I think that I view him being more successful in off ball situations. Obviously, he needs to improve his outside shooting. That was a problem in UConn, and I see it being a problem now. But I almost view him as a Jimmy Butler type player whenever I watch him play and attack the rim and how he just wants to initiate the contact. So I think there's a chance where he exists more off ball than as a point guard.
Hmm.
So overall, in our guard situation, I'm feeling pretty confident about it.
I was gonna say, so then for you with the rotations, how is that gonna look? Because I'm assuming Chris Paul's gonna start for you guys. Has that been like disclosed, I guess, or
Yeah,
if I
I,
can
I think I
guess?
think I think that's what it's going to look like. It's probably going to be Chris Paul. We're gonna have Vassell and and I think Sohan's going to be starting as well, along with Wemby. But we I think Castle's going to make his way into that starting lineup sooner rather than later, and that's probably the lineup that we're going to finish the season with. Because if Vassell is expending so much energy on offense, he really doesn't get to impact the game defensively as much as we would like him to, and that was so much of what Spurs fans wanted to see. And I think that Stephon Castle can help and step up and play that perimeter defender role pretty well.
I see. So basically, you'd be able to have the best of both worlds, kind of with both those guards in there. Because then I love Devin Vassell as an offensive player. I think he's really good, and I hope he's the one key piece aside from Wemby. I hope you guys hold on to because I think he can really, really be something. Unless obviously there's some crazy offer you can't refuse, and at some point, I mean, you got to do what you got to do. But I hope he's someone that you guys keep for the long haul. And then I'm curious, is Pop the coach through this entire rebuild for you? Or do you think at some point you got to be like, Pop, let's have this talk, man? Might be time to move.
Well, I mean, it's hard to change and grow into a new identity as a team if you still have such a strong figure in the front office like Coach Pop.
Mm,
Um, your identity is always going to be linked to Coach Pop, and that's not a bad thing. Of course, it's never a bad thing, but it also means that, sort of turning a new page or entering a new chapter is increasingly difficult. It almost means you just got to start from just start from scratch. And so whenever I look at it through that lens, I think that he just wants to kind of send the ship off in the right direction. And he's going to have nothing to do with what that ship is doing in the future, but he just wants to make sure that whoever is steering it knows what they're doing. So I think he wants to have a slight hand in it, but I think he realizes in 2-3 years time, he's going to probably have to call it quits, which is, it's sad to say.
mhm. And then I'm curious. So obviously Wemby's the guy now, right? I'm sure, like as a Spurs guy, that's all you get questions about. All you asked about. Yep, exactly. You see, big Wemby. What are the expectations for Wemby next year? Like, obviously, stat wise, I think it's a little weird to ask something like that, but more so just like, what skills of the game do you think he's got to really improve on or like look towards so that way you could be there and be like, he's actually improved as a player and not just box score looks better. So therefore, he's now better kind of deal.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good question because obviously everyone's just going to point to the counting stats is like, oh, is he scoring and rebounding
Yeah.
more? And so, but what I want to see is smarter shot selection.
Mm,
I think that there was shots where he relied on step back fadeaways a little bit too much, and I was like, you're 8-9 inches taller than your defender. You don't need to be fading away. Why not just take a regular square up shot and just shoot over your defender, and or maybe not take that shot at all and kick it and kick the ball back out, reposition yourself down low and get an even higher percentage shot. So I think some of his decision making is going to improve, as well as limiting some of his turnovers. He had a lot of just kind of silly turnovers this year, or last season. So I think that if he's limiting mistakes as well as in improving his shot selection, I think that his efficiency overall is just going to increase. And that really, it's not like he needs to work on his offensive game or he needs to improve his defensive timing or learn rotations
right.
or anything like that. It's just, man, he just needs to tweak these little things. And I think shot selection, turnovers, those would be the first things I would try to work on.
Yeah, I agree. The shot selection, I done a video on him after like the first couple weeks, and part of the issue I had at the time was also the way that you guys would have him positioned. Because the times you just have him sit in the corner, like the wing or something, like outside, and I'm like, this is kind of weird. You got this like 7 foot, you know, monster just standing out on the perimeter like he's Derek White. Um, but I liked that when he got more aggressive, the less just like let me settle for these threes because I'm the unicorn now. Honestly, I would love for his game to look like if you watch game one of the finals this year when Porzingis just started pulling up on everybody and he wasn't fading, and it was just like, yeah, I'm just taller than you. You're not gonna mess the shot up, so let me just take this real quick. If he does something like that more consistently, I think that's gonna be where things get just so deadly.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah,
And to speak on the point you just had, and what Porzingis wasn't doing was crazy. It was literally just like mid range, shoot over my
mhm.
defender, little 3-point one dribble, shoot over my defender, and that could be Wemby all day because he's more athletic than Porzingis, and so yeah, I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, I completely agree. At that point too, it's like it's like what we sort of projected Giannis could have been if he got that consistent jumper. Because then too, that rim pressure that Wemby's going to have is going to be through the roof, and then that's just man, that's just crazy to think about. So I was going to ask you too, like, what young pieces aside from Wemby are you really hoping they'll be like? I hope we can hold on to this guy. Like, I hope that you're a part of the the Wemby era of the Spurs.
I mean, I think a guy we were talking about earlier is just Devin Vassell. I think when we talk about just guys that can get a bucket on our team, there's really no one else that I would rather have going and getting that bucket. I mean, obviously Wemby,
Mhm.
but other than that, Devin Vassell, I think he's one of the hardest, or he makes some of the hardest shots in the NBA. Some of it is because he takes some hard-headed shots, and he he loves to take shots when he's being double teamed. But at the same time, I think that I see traits of really, really difficult shot making within his game, and and if he can learn a lot of the same things that Wemby needs to learn, a lot of smarter shot selection, and so if he's learning those things, I would say that he could turn into a 25, 26 point per game scorer, efficient from beyond the arc, and helping contributing to winning basketball, which is the goal.
I see. So basically, for you, you're looking at him like a Jamal Murray to a Jokic kind of ordeal. Obviously, they play differently, but hopefully you get the point. You know how comment sections can get sometimes. You make any comparison to a great player, and all of a sudden everyone gets all defensive. They go, "You can't say that. You can't do that."
Absolutely. I think to be somebody like Jamal Murray, he would have to improve his playmaking quite a bit. But at the same time, I completely agree. Just somebody that can complement the superstar and just really kind of facilitate things out on the wing a little bit more.
Yeah, for sure. And then I gotta ask you. So obviously now the Spur fan base is way more vocal than ever, right? Because you guys got Wemby. There's a brighter future. You know what you're kind of trying to do. What is a take the fan base has had, or you sat there and you looked around and you're like, "What are we talking about, man? What are we doing? Where is this coming from? Why would we do this?"
Um, are you talking about just like wild takes about
It could be,
the?
it could be, it could be any, it could be any. Like, for example, like for me as a Bulls fan, unfortunately, so much pain. Uh, we've talked about like at times like we got to keep DeMar, figure out what we could do. You know what I mean? And at times I would sit there and I would look around. And I'm like, guys, we reached the ceiling with this team, unfortunately. Like, can we move on before we basically end up where we are now, which is we're getting rid of guys for basically nothing. Um, so like, is there something where you're saying there, you're like, guys, let's not do this move, or let's not talk about this player this way. Let's kind of pump the brakes before we get a situation where we're like, why did we ever leave what we had?
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, I think one of those guys that we were trying to go after and they were asking for too much was Laurie Markkinen.
Mm,
He was one of those guys that I was like, man, he would be a really good Spurs player. Pair him next to Wemby. He's also a good defender, maybe not good enough to be a team's best rim protector, but he could stretch the floor. He's such a good player. I would love him in San Antonio, but they were asking for Keldon Johnson, like 4 first-round picks, additional cash, maybe a pick swap on top of that. And I'm sitting over here being like, that's going to damn near blow up all of the assets that we've been accumulating over the past 3 or 4 years, pretty much since the like even pre DeJounte Murray trade. So whenever I'm looking at it through that lens, that just may not be worth it
mm,
for short-term success. I don't even know if that would be good enough to get us a top 4 seed in the West, given how competitive it is.
yeah,
So and so I just wouldn't want to do something like that. And so what I was saying earlier about like that opportunity creating point guard, I think that's ultimately the move I would be okay with doing. Somebody like, I mean, obviously in a perfect world, I would want somebody like Halliburton or Tyrese Maxey or somebody like young,
mhm,
dynamic that could grow alongside of Wemby. But I think a slightly lesser version of a player like that, I would be okay with uh, kind of trying to good swing for the fences and get them.
I get you. So basically, you're trying to say like, let's just pump the brakes a little bit. Let's not try and like make the big trade now before you even know necessarily who's the piece you want to keep. Which is fair because basically you guys are like, it kind of reminds me of the Thunder now. Like you have your Wemby, who's basically their Shea, and you're hoping that you're getting the complementary pieces to kind of stick around. And then once you have some taste of like real success, then you could be like, okay, let's start swinging for the fences. Let's take the risk. And I was going to ask you, what did you think about when the big rumor was Trae Young going to the Spurs? Were you like, I don't know about this fit, or
Well, see, and that's kind of my reaction as well. It was like I could see that being a really good situation because I mean I can talk myself into anything. I was like, well, Trae Young's not that good defensively, but if you pair him alongside of Wemby, he really doesn't need to be that good defensively because you
Mhm.
have Wembanyama behind him. And so like I was trying to convince myself of a lot of things, but ultimately it would have to be Trae Young at the right price because I don't know if Trae Young is necessarily still he's young, but I don't know if he's necessarily the kind of player that's still growing, that's still
Mhm.
improving year in, year out. He's very consistent. You know, you look at his stats, he's putting up a real consistent 25 and 9, generally not really efficient, but I think that I would want somebody that has a more I'm ready to grow and kind of facilitate Wemby's growth a little bit more. Whereas Trae Young, I think he would probably want to step in and be the guy alongside of Wemby.
Right. And and for you, that's not you want it to be kind of clear, like this is the our guy. Like you could be a great number two, we'll love you, respect you, whatever, but we're not doing unless obviously I guess like whoever you got, like if you got a Halliburton, he'd somehow just like mega evolved into some like 27 and 11 guy or something. Then there's no 1A, 1B going on here. You kind of want there to be that hierarchy.
Absolutely, because I think it's gonna be really clear with Wemby. I think this is last season was the only season we're not going to see Wemby win Defensive Player of the Year probably for a few years. So we're going to see his defensive dominance immediately, and he's not going to have the beginning of the season kind of uncomfortable moments like he did last season
Right.
because that first month I think he was only averaging a little over 15 points a game and was
Yeah.
was was incredibly inefficient. So I think uh, it wouldn't surprise me if he's putting up 25 and 10 and leading the NBA in blocks per game and deep boy.
I'm actually curious. Were you one of the fans that were upset when he didn't win it this year?
I was a little bit to a certain degree just
Mhm.
because I didn't think Rudy deserved it.
Mm,
I thought that if you were to give it to somebody on Boston, who I felt like was
okay.
even though Minnesota they had the number one defense for the majority of the season, I still felt like Boston was the better team defense. So I
Mm,
felt like you could have given it to Drew or Derek White, and I wouldn't have been as mad. But to me, it was like, how could you sit there and say that Rudy was protecting the rim better than Wemby was that season? Because that just really wasn't the truth. I saw Wemby literally stop a 3-on-1 fast break himself when we played the Grizzlies. Literally, just that was something I had never seen before. And so to hear that,
mm.
people, it was voted on that Rudy was a better rim protector, but I don't know. Maybe I shouldn't be mad about that stuff.
No, I mean it's interesting. I just like asking those sort of questions. 'Cause I personally would have probably voted for Rudy if I like had a vote, which would have been really cool, I guess, to have a vote. Unless Twitter got like mad at me, I guess I would not like that part. But I don't know. It's one of those things where I'm like, the winning is weird because I've never really heard about the winning mattering for a depoy like ever. In terms of like, I guess it's always just coincidentally happened that the depoy's on like a really high seed team. But that was a weird dialogue too about like, oh well, Rudy's on the one seed in the West, and I was like, okay, that's a little weird. I don't know about that. You could just say like, for me, the argument would have just been a huge part of what made Minnesota successful this season was their defense, and I think that Rudy, even in the playoffs, you saw his impact on defense for that team was like all world. Like seeing what he was doing for that team. Obviously, he gets exploited in situations, but any player can get exploited in any sort of way. Because I'm sure you've seen it too. Sometimes, like I mean, there was that meme for the longest time of Duncan Robinson with Wemby too. Like you get him on the perimeter, a little smaller, but that doesn't mean I'm going to sit here and go, is Wemby really that good of a defender? Because he got exploited on. It's like, okay, guys, like we're getting a little gross here. Like, come on now. But I agree with you. I think Wemby's going to have a nasty run of depoys, but just prepare yourself because you know that voter fatigue is going to come in. You know that's going to happen. I mean, we
Oh yeah.
saw, yeah, you know what's going to happen. I also never forget to this day Marcus Smart winning depoy. I was just like, whoa.
I felt like that year they were just like, hey, we're just gonna give it to a guard.
That
It's
was
yeah.
so weird. And Bam still hasn't won one, which is crazy to me. Like when a guy like Bam hasn't won one, but you got Marcus Smart with one, I'm like, whoa, okay. Y'all got it then. You know what? This is your award, man. Y'all got it. Um and and then I got one last question. What is a disappointing season for the Spurs?
Well, I think a disappointing season would be just a season where there's injuries and
Mm,
we don't get to mesh the way that we want to, and because we need to build chemistry, we need to improve our skills, like literally everything that we need to do takes time, and so anything that would halt that, I think would be detrimental to our short term and long term success. But anything outside of that, like I think what we're looking at is a pretty low risk season. I think that it's a season where if we go out and we win the 35 or more games that I was thinking about, that's cool. But if we don't and put ourselves in a good position for the 2025 draft, that's not a bad thing either, because I think that this next draft class is looking a little
right.
bit is looking a little bit stronger than the one that we just saw.
I was about to ask you too. How happy were you when you got to trade? I think because it was a Rob Dillingham pick you got to trade, right? So how'd you feel about that? Like, I'm sure you must have been like pumping your fist, like, "Let's go, more picks, we're here."
I to be honest, it was kind of mixed feelings at first because I am a Rob Dillingham fan.
Mm,
I
okay.
I do like him as a player. I think that he was one of the more dynamic offensive players in that draft, and had he been 2 or 3 inches taller, I think he goes top three. And
Mm,
and so when I'm looking at it through that lens, I at first I was kind of upset, but then at the same time, more assets. I think that we're never gonna even see those picks in 2031 that we got from him. So I think we're gonna end up packaging that for a deal
mm.
in the next year or two, and though those picks really won't even be an issue. They'll be an issue for another team.
No, for sure. I mean, that move blew my mind. First of all, because I was like, "Rob Dillingham, whoa, like, what's going on here?" Because at first I was like, "Okay, maybe you guys get like, you know." Because at first I was like, maybe you guys are going to go for like Dalton Connect. I was like, okay, this is a layup, right? Because if you want to move on from Keldon, you have another wing just in case, right? Like, and you could kind of sit there, pluck and play. Like you don't got to worry about him thinking he's, oh, I'm gonna be our number two. I'm gonna give it. I mean, like he'll know his place. And I'm sure, and it was like that's the most pop thing ever to get like an older player, but you're like, but he knows the game. Um, so then when you got Dillingham, I was like, whoa, okay, so we're trying to get this like little nasty guard duo going on. I was like, oh, hold up. And then you guys traded. I was like, whoa, what the hell's going on? I was like, and then I wondered too. I was like, what the hell did Minnesota have picks to trade? When the hell did this happen?
Right.
That blew
That
my
that
mind.
yeah, that was a big surprise. But in all honesty, I don't think that's a bad fit for Rob Dillingham in Minnesota.
Oh, not. I think it's great for sure.
Yeah,
Like if
he can learn a
there's
lot from Mike Connolly.
absolutely if there's any contending team that could have traded for someone like Rob Dillingham, they were probably a top team because you don't know how long Conley has. I mean, he could be on the bench. He can learn. You have really good bench pieces next to him, anyways, because you have six man of the year, Nas Reed. You got Nas Reed there. That, you teach him, hey, like being on the bench isn't like a terrible thing. Like no one thinks that you're a terrible player because of this now. Like you're chilling. Um, I think that was a great trade for them. But I just love what you guys are doing, man, because I like you guys are taking it slow and steady, but you're willing to experiment, and you're also really placing the bet on your guys like consistently, and you're drafting around them. I feel like in a smart way because some of these other rebuilding teams at times I sit there and I'm watching their drafts, and obviously I guess a bit of the difference is some of these other teams their main guys either injury prone or like I mean like you talked about, well, a disappointing season for you guys could be like I haven't seen LaMelo Ball play with all these people consistently, so now I have a fifth pick overall do I draft a Nikola Topic? Because I'm like, hey, bro, like, God forbid, you never know. Like, I can't sit here and then have nothing. Or Cade Cunningham, right? Like, he's missed a bunch of years. So then it's like, how is he our guy we're building around? Or like, are we hoping to find a bigger and better guy out of nowhere? Like, I love the way you guys are taking the rebuild. And I'm curious because we're just about to wrap up here. What is something I guess you want to tell the audience? It could be about yourself, your channel. What is something that you sort of want to leave a remark on for the audience?
Well, honestly, I do a lot of like live basketball chats on TikTok and stuff like that, and
Mm,
I hear so many people talk about the game in such a strange way, and it's almost like people debate basketball and they're trying to be right more than they're trying to further the discussion of the game
mm,
itself. And I think that whenever we enter discourse about the sport we love, we should enter it in a way that we should be furthering the topic we're talking about. We should be discussing it in a way that really is uplifting for the sports, and we're not just trying to cook each other. So I think if I'm going to leave on any sentiment, let's speak about the game in an intelligent way and try to further a positive discussion of the game we love.
no, absolutely. I agree. That's a big reason I made the channel because I was like, so much of this discourse is so like it became very like bipolar. It was either basically you love a player, you hate a player. There's no idea that you just not even don't care about a player, but you're just like, they're there, like they're cool. Like I don't really. I mean, I'm not gonna crap on them, but I'm also not gonna go. This is our, the future, face of the league. Um, it seems like modesty is like gone out the door for NBA discourse. So that was a big thing. And again, man, I really appreciate having you on. It means a lot because again, I think that's the other thing is collaboration is something that for whatever reason in the NBA community, especially, or even just in YouTube, because you know how YouTube can get. It's just for some reason it's like weirdly like frowned upon, or like unless you're like legitimately friends with the person in real life, it's like you can't rationalize like why would I want to help another creator. It's like I've never understood that, man, and that's the big reason I'm doing this. It's to show that this community is something that we can all band together and do something greater. So I really appreciate you being a part of it, man, because you definitely embody that. So again, thank you so much.
Well, Michael, I appreciate you. Thank you for having me on. Would love to be on again. If we want to chat like during the season, whenever there's some interesting Spurs stuff happening, I would love to do it, man.
Of course, if you ever want me on your pod, just let me know, brother. I
Yes,
got you.
yes.
Easy guest. Easy. I got you, brother. I really appreciate you and your time, man. Thank you so much.